Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar series. We usually do Tariff Tuesdays, but this is a special version called Building a Resilient Supply Chain. Normally we'd have Regina Barella introducing this, but you're stuck with me. So before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items for you. A friendly reminder that we cannot provide legal or tax advice, so this is for informational purposes only. Secondly, on your screen is our safe harbor policy. Take a minute to review it. We're going to be recording this event, and you'll receive a copy of the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize the windows if you like. And the additional resources section contains a lot of great resources, including the slide deck, and you're going to get that, again, a copy after the fact. So there are several ways to engage with us. First, if you have any questions, use the Ask a Question box. So we will try to answer your questions. If you ask during the webinar, please do, because we try to weave your questions into the presentation as we see things that are kind of relevant to what we're talking about. You can also submit troubleshooting questions there, or you can also join the attendee chat, which is in the bottom of your screen. So click the attendee chat. You can introduce yourself, network, and talk about today's topic. And then third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on the emoji icon and reacting. And then last, since this session is oh no, this last part is not true. This is eligible for CPE credit, which is the next slide. So we're offering 1 CPE credit for today's presentation. So for those of you looking to receive credit, note that we're going to have we're going to do 4 poll questions. So you have to respond to 3 of them, I believe. Yes, 3 of them. The poll question will pop up on your screen for a limited amount of time. We'll give you enough time to answer the question. So remember, you have to answer at least 3 of those. You also have to attend today's session for at least 50 minutes. So you're stuck with us for at least 50 minutes if you want CPE credit. And once you do meet the CPE requirements, your certificate will be available to download in the Earn Certification box on your screen. Click that icon to access it, and your certificate will also be available in a post-event email. If you have any technical issues with the poll questions, please reach out to us in the Q&A or let us know, so you can let us know, and we'll try to help you out. Okay, so that's it for the housekeeping. We're gonna, you can meet your presenters, one of which is me. So I'm Craig Reed. I'm the General Manager of the Cross-Border Business Unit here at Avalara. We also have Patrick Frith, who's our Senior Director of Growth within the Cross-Border Business Unit, Shane Bogdan, who's our Director of Sales here in the Cross-Border Business at Avalara, and our special guest, Evan Wright, who is the General Manager of our Tax Research Business Unit. So welcome, Evan. All right, from an agenda standpoint, we are going to go through some of the latest news in trade compliance. We're going to talk about some of the implications to your business, some of the strategies you can consider and that others have considered, some of your peers, how you can take action with Avalara, and then finally, as I mentioned, some Q&A, but again, feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. Our first CPE poll question, so get ready to answer a poll question. So far in 2025, how have trade policy changes, tariffs, de minimis compliance rules most impacted your business? Do we, gents, remind me, is there can they select multiple here, or is this a one only?
Yeah, I think it's multiple.
Okay, you can select multiple, great. All right, we'll give you a couple more seconds to do that. All right, let's see what everyone said here. All right, a third, increased costs passed to customers, higher internal compliance admin workload, and minimal impact so far, split evenly. And then a smaller amount forced us to adjust sourcing or logistics. So that's an interesting outcome. You know, the 33% is actually lower than we've seen in other of our polls. So, so we'll see how the other poll questions kind of pan out. Next, though, I think we have Shane, you're up to talk about the latest news in trade and tariffs.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, everybody, for joining us here today. And for those of you that are on our weekly Trade and Tariff Tuesdays, appreciate the double attendance here. For those of you who are not, Avalara for the past 20 plus years has been in the how do you make compliance easy space. And with cross-border, it's been no different. So really when all of what we're calling the trade whiplash started back at the beginning of February, our team has been all over this to make sure that our clients, our partners are getting the most updated information around cross-border, making sure that the tariff rates, HS classifications, that they are leveraging internally or passing on to their consumers are the most updated based upon the ups and downs of tariff on, tariff off, tariff pushed, et cetera. But we're just going to walk you through here, 3 kind of quick slides of what's transpired over the past 8 months. And to set this up really is, this really started at the end of January where 3 countries were in the crosshairs, from the administration in relation to trade. That was China, Canada, and Mexico. And you can see here there were some pieces around, stopping the legal inflow of fentanyl, so public safety, limiting our relation in terms of dependence on foreign goods, and how do you bring more domestic manufacturing back to the States. And really, throughout these 8 months, it's transpired outside of just these three countries, and now to a global scale of tariffs being implemented in all countries that are doing business with the U.S. And we call it the whiplash just because there are tariffs that have been turned on, tariffs that have been turned off. There's a variety of tariffs. So it's been very difficult for, we tackle with this on a day-to-day basis, and we can only imagine what our clients and partners deal with this. And you can see 2 stats here. There were only 30,000 duty and tax changes in all of 2024. Well, year to date, there's been over 600, close to 619,000. So we have been up to speed on adjusting those as quickly as possible anytime anything comes out in terms of what's being published at the Federal Registrar. But again, our goal is to help you guys all stay informed, be proactive versus reactive in these instances. So just a quick overview of what's happened in H1. And if you do follow us on our weekly tariff and trade Tuesdays, we usually have this as like a 3-part slide. And there have been so many key dates that have happened, but we've synthesized this really into 6. So the first one is when this got kicked off on February 4th. This, again, was the crosshairs of China, Canada, and Mexico, that the states were basically saying, we're going to impose tariffs on you. Well, it only ended up being China on February 4th, and they basically put a pause on Canada and Mexico, which were then going to go into effect on March 4th. They tried to have some negotiation room between February 4th and March 4th. Nothing really came to fruition. March 4th occurs, 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, with the caveat being anything that is declared USMCA eligible would not be receiving any of these 25% tariffs. So March 4th hits, and then all of a sudden we start seeing, additional retaliatory tariffs come into play here. Canada, they basically issue a 25% tariff on close to $60 billion worth of U.S. goods coming into Canada. China continues to ratchet their retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. Now, in April, there was the big Rose Garden event where, Trump came out. If many of you kind of have this image of, he has these billboards really of 57 countries. And no longer is it just Canada, Mexico, and China in the crosshairs here. Now it is all countries that are doing any sort of imports into the United States. And basically they say, we're going to impose a 10% tariff across all countries outside of Canada, China, and Mexico, which they have their own tariff rates. And then for 57 other countries, they're going to be imposing what they were calling reciprocal tariffs under this IEEPA clause. And you consider this IEEPA clause, you're probably seeing this a lot in the papers today. It's the International Emergency Economic Protection Act. These are what a majority of these tariffs are falling under with the court case right now, but set that aside for the moment. But they're basically said that for additional 57 countries, we're going to enact between 11 and 50% IEEPA tariff on these other nations. Now, following that, these were to come into place on April 5th. What had happened then the following week, you probably remember the markets were going up and down, and basically the administration said, you know what, let's put a pause on this right now and open up for negotiations. We are then going to, if we come to negotiations between now and August 7th, we'll adjust the rates. If not, these rates will then go back in place. But they kept the 10% across the board during that time. Canada and China and Mexico stayed the same. Well, kind of plot twist here happened on May 28th, where a couple companies went to the Court of International Trade in New York and basically said, hey, these IEEPA tariffs that are being put into play, does the executive branch really have this authority? And do IEEPA tariffs actually say that you can basically impose tariffs this broadly? Well, the Court of International Trade agreed with the plaintiffs in this case. Within 24 hours, though, there was an appeals that came into motion. And since May 28th, all the tariffs have remained the same, but now this is moved all the way up to the Supreme Court. So this is going to be very interesting over the next 30 days. I believe the final oral arguments around the IEEPA tariffs and the Supreme Court ruling is going to be on November 6th. So there's a lot riding on what's going to actually be happening with these IEEPA tariffs. Are they going to stay in play? Are they going to be pulled back? If they are pulled back, how do refunds occur, et cetera? So a lot on this piece. Another component here is the topic of de minimis. And de minimis is really the threshold at which goods being imported into a market are declared duty-free. And this was a really strong catalyst for a lot of these tariffs coming into play back in February, specifically in relation to China. Patrick's going to dive deeper into this in a second, but as of July 3rd, as of May 2nd, all inbound parcels coming in from China and Hong Kong have been stripped from their de minimis exception. On July 30th, the U.S. announced that all other countries that are importing into the U.S. under an $800 de minimis threshold will now be deemed dutiable. So previously, goods coming into the United States under $800 were not deemed dutiable. As of August 29th, they are now. So this is a big piece. Again, we'll dive deeper into this in a second. And then on August 7th, the big date on August 7th was all of these 57 other countries, the reciprocal tariffs went back into play. Now, there were some negotiations that came in. There were only a handful of countries that had their original rate increased. There were some slight negotiations that reduced those reciprocal tariff rates, such as the EU on these pieces. But those rates are now in effect. And at the current moment, outside of China, there is really no other key date in terms of additional tariffs on the book right now in relation to IEEPA outside of the Supreme Court, this November 6th date, and additional some 232s here. So just highlights on what happened during those pieces. You saw that there were deadlines and extensions. There were tariff letters that were sent out to really drive negotiations here. They announced that transshipment of goods, basically saying that if you're importing from one country that has a high tariff rate and say that those imports coming in from another market have a lower tariff rate, falsely stating that, the CBP is going to go after you and charge you additional 40% duty. They're cracking down on this. We'll give some stats on this in a second. The August 7th tariff rates are now in effect. And then another key piece here, just tied to the whole component of de minimis, this factor of goods coming in under $800. Postal shipments for about 88 international postal agencies have basically been suspended. And that's because the CBP is suspending de minimis for goods coming into the U.S., basically said if you are a postal carrier that are sending goods to the U.S., you must adhere to the calculation, collection, and payment of those duties. Well, these postal carriers, don't have that specific technology in place. It's a burden on them. So 88 of 176 of those have basically suspended and are slowly coming back online. We'll talk about more of that in a second, but that's really what's happened over the H1 since February here. So, Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to touch on the end of de minimis. We said this at the time when it happened. This is as big a news as the reciprocal tariff announcement in the Rose Garden back in April. It's very significant, and you can see why. You can see those numbers there in the graph, in the chart. You can see the increase in the number of de minimis shipments, and at its peak, it was over 2 million shipments per day, coming into the US from overseas underneath the de minimis. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with the definition of de minimis, it's a threshold established by a country whereby anything which is valued below that threshold enters without any duty and passes into commercial circulation within the country. Anything above that is subject to duty. So the US, bit of a history lesson here, the US de minimis threshold was in the Obama era was $250, and it was increased by the Obama administration to $800, which led to this influx of duty-free shipments entering into the country. So May the 2nd, that was the announcement which shocked the world, which was that they were eliminating de minimis for goods from China and Hong Kong. So of those 2 million shipments per day, vast majority were coming from China and Hong Kong. Think Temu, think Shein, all these shipments pouring into the country, the tap just switched off. And then the big beautiful bill that passed through and got approved. And in the big beautiful bill was the provision to eliminate de minimis for all of the countries. And we thought that was going to happen in 2027. It did not. It happened August the 29th. Chaos. So millions of shipments which had been coming into the country below that value, below the $800 value, all of a sudden were exposed to duty treatment. So it just ground postal activity, low value shipments just ground to a halt basically, because merchants, e-tailers, marketplaces weren't too sure how to deal with this sub 800 value shipment coming into the country and now having duty collected on it. So that's where we are today. The US it's not the only country with a zero de minimis. There are 40 other countries around the world which also have zero de minimis, but the US by far, of course, is the biggest one. Moving on, so what does that mean? If you're overseas and you're exporting into the US, or you're in the US and you're coordinating imports into the US from overseas, what choices do you have? Well, there's no Type 86 anymore, ECCFS, CFS, all that now you are subject to two forms of entries. Entry type 1 and entry type 11. The first one, entry type 1, that's a formal clearance, which it's called a formal clearance. Anything over $2,500 has to be cleared under a type 1 clearance. Anything below 2,500 all the way down to zero is an informal entry, and it's considered a low value for low value shipments, anything below 2,500. What do they both have in common? There's a bit more work required on a type 1, but what they have both in common is the inclusion of a 10-digit HS code, which means no longer can you just provide a description of the product. You know, it's footwear, it's a shirt, it's an iPad, whatever. You can't just provide a description now. You must provide a HS code, because that is linked, inextricably linked to the duty which will now be paid on that shipment when it enters the US. So, in summary, this is as big a news, I think, as the reciprocal tariffs that were announced back in April, and is going to cause a lot of headaches and will continue for a long time. A lot of headaches for exporters overseas bringing stuff into the US, and importers who are already in the US bringing things from overseas. So we're going to have a quick look at CBP trade stats. So all these changes, this is current until the 7th of September. So it's bringing in a lot of revenue for the US. CBP are responsible for collecting it. And so far this year, up until June, I should say, for the first 6 months, $166 billion have been collected, of which 2/3, over 100,000, $103 billion have been collected under these new regulations that have been enforced through executive orders over the last few months. And you can take a look at that table there. We're not going to go through all these numbers, but the column, you can see full year 2024, and you can see year to date, essentially, up until September 2025. And if you look, you can compare the numbers. Look at steel, for instance. That's governed by Section 232. For the full year last year, 2024, 1.2 billion was collected by CBP. We've since had Section 232 enforced on steel, and so far, year to date, 4.4, or almost 4 times, $4.4 billion has been collected. So this is all going into the US government coffers, and you could see the numbers are absolutely staggering. If you look at the IEEPA, there's a whole list of them there, China and Hong Kong at the top, and then India further down there. You can see there was nothing collected under IEEPA. IEEPA is a long-standing piece of legislation, goes back decades, but wasn't in place in 2024, is in place now, as we all know, 2025, and you can see the staggering amount there that's been collected, billions of dollars, which is flowing straight through to the government coffers. So very, very significant. CBP are being very diligent in the enforcement of duty collection. And if you follow them on LinkedIn, I suggest you follow them on LinkedIn if you don't already, but they are frequently announcing the risks associated with avoiding the payment of duties for goods coming in. And it includes steep fines to your business. As the importer of record in the US, you are responsible. You're on the hook. So steep fines, they can seize the inventory, which will cause obviously huge business disruption. You can lose your license to import. You can lose those privileges, and it goes all the way up to criminal charges. Remember, this is the law. So, breaking the law brings consequences, obviously. And in this case, it can go all the way through to criminal charges. And it's happening. There's been a couple of examples which are available. It's public information. Race and Global, they were found to have not paid duties and taxes and received a $3.4 million penalty. And Evolution Flooring, they do the hardwood flooring in your homes and offices and so on. They had to settle $8.1 million, again, for unpaid duties and taxes. So it's really happening. The law is in effect and is being upheld. I'll pass you on now to Craig to take you through the implications to your business.
Yeah, one of those trade statistics that I found interesting is that China accounts for about, just doing the math, about 38% of the overall increase. So that's pretty significant. So some of the implications to your business, we like to call these the four puzzle pieces of global trade, or the four horsemen. These are the critical pieces of information that you need to have for your products in order to be successful in global trade. The first is de minimis. So we talked a lot about de minimis. Patrick took you through some of the de minimis changes that happened with the US, but keep in mind, de minimis exists for every country in the world. So if you're shipping to other countries, you need to be aware of the de minimis level. And not just that, but de minimis can be different for duty and for tax. So a lot of countries outside of the US charge value-added tax. And those value-added tax levels may be different than the duty levels at which products get charged. So you need to understand what your de minimis levels are for the products that you're shipping, so you know when duty starts to apply. Second is country of origin. And we get questions all the time around this, and there's a lot of confusion, maybe less now that it's become such public information, but country of origin is not the country it was shipped from. So a lot of people make that mistake. They think, oh, it was shipped from the UK, so it's UK country of origin, even though it was made in China. No. Country of origin is where the product was made. There's rules around how you determine country of origin, but in general, think of it as where the vast majority of the value of the product was created, or it was or other inputs were transformed into something else. So that's really important to know. For all your products, you have to know your country of origin. And third, and probably the most important, what I'd call, the Rosetta Stone of global commerce, is tariff code classification, commonly known in the industry as HS codes. So HS codes are common up to 6 digits for any member country of the World Trade Organization. So think of this as like a numeric description of a good. And the thing, though, is that they're consistent up to 6 digits, but every country in the world appends between 3 and 6 more digits, typically 4. So it's usually a 10-digit code. In the US, for example, it's a 10-digit code called the HTS code. And there are about 20,000 of them that describe every type of good that is produced. And now keep in mind that every country around the world has a version of that 20,000 line HTS code library. And if you take country of origin and tariff code classification together, think of an Excel table or a spreadsheet. The rows are the HS codes or the tariff codes. The columns would be the country of origin, where it was made. The intersection of those two is the duty rate or the tariff rate that would apply for that particular good. So knowing those two things is critical. And the last one is declared value. So obviously, what you pay, that tariff rate, the total duty that you pay is dependent on what the value of the good is times the tariff rate. So make sure you declare your value correctly. Patrick mentioned the CBP enforcement. Declared value is one of the things they're looking out for, in addition to country of origin. So make sure you get that right. So de minimis, country of origin, tariff code, classification, declared value, the key elements, the key pieces of information that you need to have for your business. All right, let's turn the page now to some of the things that are happening in the industry. We just kind of picked up some of the headlines from some larger companies. Bit of a mixed bag around de minimis. So Lululemon, everyone I think would know who Lululemon is, athletic wear, cut its outlook after the de minimis ended. So they're expecting about 200 million in tariffs this year alone and 320 million next year. So these are shipments coming from Canada into the US. So they're being impacted pretty significantly by the end of de minimis. And for Coach and Kate Spade's parent company, Tapestry, they believe it's going to be about $160 million tariff impact this year. So what are they doing about it? They're trying to alter their supply chain, reduce their expenses, and increase prices. So, there's a combination of things that brands can do. You can either raise your prices, you can absorb some of the costs, or you can push some of the costs onto your suppliers. And I think that's, what we're seeing different companies do at different levels. American companies, on the other hand, are kind of celebrating, right? Because less competition, the prices of their competitors who are not in the US have gone up. So Urban Outfitters said that can only help. Five Below shared a similar sentiment. And Simon Property Group said that he wished the loophole for some Chinese companies took real advantage of was closed before Forever 21 was on the path to bankruptcy. So this parent company of Forever 21 saying, hey, we might not have gone bankrupt if this had been removed earlier on. So, so some interesting effects going on in the industry. Next, let's flip to this. We thought this was really interesting. Some of the shifts in trade as a result of the tariffs. You can see the graphic on the right. And look at China. So 7.7% drop in import share from 2017 to 2024. That's a very significant drop. Think about the amount of imports that come in from China. Pretty massive decline. So, it didn't just start with this, right? Because there have been additional tariffs, even in the past Trump administration, that were levied against China, Section 301 in particular, that the Biden administration kept in place. So it's been a longer road with China. It didn't just start now. And then the beneficiaries of that, Japan being down a little bit, obviously Russia for obvious reasons is down a bit, but really picking up the slack. Mexico was the biggest beneficiary of that. Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, you can see the names there. Interestingly, for me, because I'm based in Canada, Canada remained rather almost flat. And in fact, we're going to talk about USMCA in a bit, but the effective tariff rate for Mexico and Canada is actually relatively low because of USMCA. And, that's due to be renegotiated, but we'll see what happens with USMCA. So a lot of interesting flows, and this is up to 2024. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens between this last report and any new data that we get. Another interesting set of graphics that we got that we thought we would share with you is breaking down the trade destruction. So in other words, what is the ripple effect of the new policies? So where have the contractions come from? And you can see the big one. We talked about that. I mentioned that 36% of the increased tariffs are coming from China. Look at the contraction in trade: 156 billion, or 157 billion. EU 93 billion. You see a lot of the APAC trading partners around the edge as well, a pretty significant impact. Brazil, for being a small country, a large impact there as well. So it's pretty interesting where all that contraction is taking, and it's a lot, right? 450 billion in trade already being removed effectively from the international economy. So if you flip the page on that and say, well, how will the tariffs hit key products? Before the base price before the U.S. tariffs, you can see on the left-hand side was, it was very small, but short run, look at the increase in metals. So that's the Section 232 tariffs. Clothing, that would be mostly, I would guess, Section 301 from China. Crops, electrical equipment, electronics, machinery, etc. Significant price jumps after the U.S. tariffs. That's in the short run. So that's before, we talked about, okay, what are companies doing? Well, they're pushing their suppliers, they're absorbing costs, they're passing some on to consumers. In the long run, what we're expecting is that these changes are going to contract a little bit. So the supply chains will absorb them, companies will move to local, suppliers will get more efficient, and consumers will pay less of the overall. So that's what's expected in the long run. We thought that was interesting. Links at the bottom are clickable. When you get this version of the presentation, we'll email it to you after the fact. You can take a closer look at this, but we thought that was interesting. Some more examples for you of real companies and challenges and how they've impacted them. Apple, we all know Apple. Most of their products are coming from Taiwan, South Korea. Their pre-2025 tariff rate was 5% on those products. But now it's jumped to 15% and 20% respectively. So what are they doing? They're shifting 100% of their glass production for U.S. products to Kentucky, away from Taiwan and South Korea. Germany, over 40% of its, 46% of its total volume came from Vietnam and Indonesia. Beforehand, it was just under 10%, but now jumped to 20%, just under 20% overall for their products. So what are they doing? They're raising their prices due to that tariff hit. So the price, they've chosen to raise prices. Conagra, what are they doing? They get steel for their cans from Mexico. That would have typically been exempt beforehand, but USMCA doesn't apply there. So now they're paying 25% on that. So what are they doing? They're raising their prices. Ferrari has gone from 2.5% tariff rate to 25%. Maybe people buying Ferraris don't care too much that the prices of their cars are going up 10%, but they're raising prices. And Ford is raising prices on their models too that are produced in Mexico. So you can see some of the different things that folks are doing, which is part of what all companies are going to have to respond to this in some way, shape, or form. So shifting to local, pushing their suppliers, raising prices, or some combination of those things. So with that in mind, what are some of the strategies that folks can consider? I think it's over to you, Patrick, is it?
Shane?
Yeah, got it here. So, no, Craig, we're already seeing this is happening in the market right now in terms of what manufacturers are doing to kind of diversify here and do kind of supply chain optimization. But, here's a couple, some steps that we've been seeing. And in fact, we can help out with a few of these here. So explore diversification of shipping carriers and or sources of supply. So this one really being let's think about it as the sources of supply. Again, country of origin is really dictating the tariff rate on the goods coming into the United States. So what are other markets that can help you manufacture and have a lower tariff rate on those? But you should also be thinking about the supply chain component of transportation here, because what are the costs then based upon where those goods are coming from? We saw earlier this year, in some cases, DHL had actually suspended some of the volume that they were having coming into the United States as part of the de minimis threshold here. Then you saw, as part of the whiplash back in May, June, you saw spot rates on some of the carriers basically hit annual highs from Shanghai to LA based upon proactivity of thinking, let's get our goods into the US as quickly as possible before these tariff rates come into play. And then those rates completely drop once the tariff rates then did enter the then did hit the market. So you have to think about these things based upon all facets of the supply chain and kind of model those out. Which kind of leads into number 2 here, which is automating global trade compliance. How do you start taking the understanding of, okay, well, if a majority of my goods are shipping from manufactured from China at X tariff rate, what if I move them to another market that had a lower tariff rate? So there leverage tools out there like ours. We have capabilities specifically around this with our Trade Hub capabilities of allowing you to model and modify how your supply chain should look based upon real-time estimates of duties and other compliance concerns here. Obviously, working with a custom broker and also a trade attorney is absolutely huge. We get a lot of questions all the time, specifically in relation to, well, X amount of my good was manufactured in X market, Y was manufactured in another market. What do we say as country of origin there? That is that's the biggest. I think somebody even put that in the chain here now of what do I declare country of origin based upon mixed components. You really have to work with a trade attorney and broker on those pieces, because it really is the number one question that's happening right now with tariff rates tied to COO. Ensuring your product details are compliant with the regulations. Craig mentioned that what we call it the 4 horsemen of global trade, understanding the de minimis thresholds, understanding the country of origin, understanding what your HS classification code is, and then ultimately what that monetary value is. Now, you should also understand what are those composites of your goods made of and have records of those, because that ultimately impacts what that specific HS code is, and also country of origin if it is a mixed component of parts across there. And then a building inventory to absorb short-term headwinds. So this was something that we were seeing again back in May, June of basically this influx with the anticipation that August, these tariff rates were coming back in. There was a slight pause back down to that 10%. We just saw the spot rates on those shipping containers go really to a high there. So a lot of inventory coming into the U.S. and really putting that in things like free trade zones, bonded warehouses, et cetera, to bring these goods in before those pieces hit. So Patrick, just now over to you on the piece here about strategies to implement these things.
Right. So an expansion there, really, on your last point, Shane. You're absolutely right. We saw a lot of activity in terms of bulk imports. Okay, they were trying to get organizations, importers, exporters. They were trying to get ahead of these tariff changes, bringing everything into the U.S. Just to avoid the changes that were going to take place in August and later down the road. What we've also seen now, because of that de minimis, remember we spoke about de minimis a little earlier on, is companies, we speak to companies every single day, all of us, customers, prospects, so on and so forth. So we get to see these trends. And so we're seeing now, if you're an exporter outside the US, sending things into the US, or you're an importer bringing things in, and you've been using that de minimis threshold to do direct to consumer, B2C, that model is under question now, because remember, duty's being applied to everything. If it costs $2, the duty's applied to it. It's got a value. It's got a commercial value. So organizations are looking at bulk imports. So they know that they're going to be selling these products in the US. They're going to sell 5,000 units in their projections over the next few months. What do? Do you bring in 5,000 individual shipments into different gateways of the US? Because you're still exposed to the duty. Or do you bulk import all 5,000, pay the duty on it, and then warehouse it, and then do a domestic distribution from a warehouse somewhere in the US? So these are big question marks, which a lot of companies are answering at the moment. So, but there's a trade-off. I mean, B2C, of course, is the fastest way. You use an express carrier, you can be anywhere in the world within 2 or 3 days. You can get it straight to a doorstep in, you can ship it from Singapore to a doorstep in Texas within 2 or 3 days. If you're going the bulk import route, then you're going to have to, you're going to put it on the sea, okay? So there's 3 weeks right there, okay? You've got to get it into the US, you've got to clear it, put it into a warehouse, put it on a shelf, and then pull it off the shelf and stick it into a domestic distribution. So that your 2 or 3 days have gone immediately. But your costs, the consolidated cost is reduced. The duty will always be the same. It doesn't matter whether you bring it in a sea container or you bring it in by air as an individual shipment. The duty rates, remember, they're linked to declared value, the four horsemen, declared value, HS code, and the country of origin. So that cocktail, that calculation, that formula doesn't change regardless of how it enters into the country. But it's going to be cost beneficial for some organizations. That will be cost beneficial, especially those who are projecting their sales and can allow for that ocean time rather than air freight. So these are questions that you should be asking yourself. De minimis is gone now, so it is a good question to ask yourself as an organization as to whether or not this will suit your business model. So things to think about there, and ask of your own organization, are we doing it the right way now? The rules have changed, the landscape's changed. Are we still importing and distributing to our US customers correctly? We'll move on to USMCA, Shane. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll touch upon USMCA just because this is hitting the news wire, and it is a key part of, if we're talking about, again, Canada, Mexico, the eligibility to not receive those duties as part of it. So anything that is stemming from Canada, imports in the US from Canada or Mexico under USMCA are eligible for duty-free trade. A quick stat here, previously back in February when this all got kicked off, 38% of Canadian exports coming to the US were eligible for USMCA. Well, RBC just did a poll back in June or July, and now 92% of the goods coming in from Canada to the US are USMCA eligible. So, a lot of these manufacturers are now saying, oh, you know what, we actually need to go forward and make sure that we get our USMCA eligible stamp as part of this, so we do not have to pay these specific duty pieces. Now, the thing about USMCA right now is it's really up for review in 2026. So the US is now getting kickstarted really in terms of not specifically the renegotiation phase now, but they're starting this mandatory joint review. Canada has already kicked this off back in May. So this is definitely a hot topic. And even yesterday, Canada and Trump were meeting. Mark Carney and Trump were at the White House yesterday, starting to talk about these things. And I know they were basically saying that we want to make sure that there's fair treatment. But the U.S. has really remained non-committal about the USMCA deal, although they are expressing some optimism on here. So we put these 6 things down here. I'm not going to go specifically into details here, but if you are looking to understand the steps of USMCA eligibility, you can go on the CBP website. You can go on the the Canadian CBSA website. They will walk you through these specific steps, to understand eligibility, what data components, how do we complete the certification and basically maintain these records so that these goods that are being imported into the U.S. are eligible for USMCA. So we'll now move this over to a poll question here.
Yeah, I'll take over the polls. Yeah, so we had some questions about the polls, so I'm going to give you a bit more time. I think we were maybe a little too quick on the first one. Apologize for that. So how are you planning to adjust your supply chain due to these changes, diversifying your suppliers and manufacturers, switching to local, new trade technologies, rethinking things, other ones we don't list here or you don't know? You can select multiple of these. So please go ahead and make your choices. It'll be interesting to see how this compares to our results on our Tariff Tuesday series, because we sure saw a shift from I don't know yet to some specific strategies. So we'll see if that holds with this group. Okay, a couple more seconds. Hopefully everyone has the time to do it. All right, let's flip to the results. Yeah, very consistent with Tariff Tuesday, guys. I don't know yet has dropped. When this first all happened, I don't know yet was like 80, 90%. Nobody knew what they were going to do. But now you see folks actually implementing some strategies. I think, too, that I can't say it's stabilized completely, but at least there's a little more certainty than the chaos that ensued during the summer. So diversification and switching to local, rethinking your distribution strategies are the most popular, obviously. So that is interesting and very consistent with what we see on the other polls that we do. We have another poll question here. In addition to that, what are your plans for addressing the increased costs that are resulting from this? Are you going to pass them on to your customers? Are you going to include a tariff surcharge, absorb the cost, or share it with your suppliers? So we talked about that in the earlier slide where, you know, the long run cost impact is expected to decrease as a result of all of these different things. So curious what you folks are thinking about doing. Again, this is something that we saw some interesting patterns in our other webinar series that, you know, really shifted quite dramatically from an initial sort of strategy to a later strategy. So see if that is consistent with what you folks are doing. Pull results really quickly here. Yeah, that's consistent. So, you know, early on, what we saw was that the vast majority were trying to absorb the costs, and that has since shifted to a mix, which is what we're seeing here. So, interestingly, that the sharing the tariff costs with the suppliers is at 25%. That's very, very consistent. So, you know, there's going to be a little bit of the cost borne by the suppliers. Companies are absorbing a bit of it, but the majority of it's being passed on to the customer as a tariff surcharge or some increase in price. So that's, again, very consistent, gentlemen. All right, so how can these businesses and our customers and our attendees keep up with these changes?
Yeah, so I mean, the question is, can you keep up with the changes? And the answer is yes, okay? The answer, but I will caveat the answer by saying compliance, compliance, compliance. That is how you keep up with changes. You want to avoid penalties, fines, delays, merchandise confiscation, criminal charges, all those things that the CBP have listed as consequences of non-compliance. You want to avoid all of that first and foremost, okay? It's not good for business. It's not good for executives. It's not good for shareholders. It's not good for your customers, most importantly, when these things happen. So therefore, remember the four horsemen: declared value, country of origin, HS code. You've got to make sure that all of those are compliant, because in that way, and you pay your duty amounts, the appropriate duty amounts, your shipments will pass through into the country, okay? And then onto your customers. Customer promise delivered. Make sure you're paying the right amount of duty. There's no need to underpay. Well, there's certainly no need to, you can't underpay, but there's no need to overpay. So rather than using random HS codes to describe your product, make sure you're using the correct HS code. So you're paying to the penny the right amount of duty. Do not misdeclare. Do not change HS codes because it's got a better duty rate. That's fraudulent, okay? You have to use the correct HS codes and, of course, the correct declared value. You want to avoid added costs to your products and therefore to your customers and your supply chain. So delays when things get held up because paperwork isn't right, or your HS codes are being questioned, or the declared value is being questioned, or even the country of origin. We'll talk a little bit more. I see some questions here about country of origin. If that's being questioned, it holds everything up. It gets delayed because these questions, CBP want the answers, rightly so. They're protecting our borders. So you have to answer those questions. Things get delayed, you get storage fees, then you have to rush it to the customer's doorstep because you're behind schedule. So all these things add costs to your bottom line. You don't want that. So you're not alone. We did a poll recently, and over 50% of the respondents said, yes, this is a headache, the changing environment, but it's a solvable headache. And the answer is compliance, compliance, compliance. Make sure you get it right upstream. So you can take action, and we're here to help you. And we're quickly going to go through how we can help you. So there's a number of ways in which we can help you. Our flagship product is AvaTax Cross Border. That allows you in real time to calculate the duties and taxes of any product into the US. It doesn't just stop at the US, of course. We do anywhere in the world. So if you're an exporter as well, we can help there. But we can help you calculate. And we've got tools which allow you to tariff engineer. So you can compare different countries of origin for the same widget, same product, same raw material, whatever it is that you're bringing into the country, and you can see the difference. How much duty will you pay if it comes from Vietnam versus from India? You can see those differences, and you can make sourcing decisions on those on that information. HS classification, again, the Rosetta Stone, as Craig said earlier on, getting your HS codes right. Give us the product description, send it to us. We can classify accurately those HS codes, so you know you're shipping with confidence, and when it gets to CBP and that customs entry is being made, that you're paying to the penny the right amount of duty for that particular item that's being imported. And then, of course, our trade and tariff library, which, amongst other things, has got restrictions in there and prohibitions. Can I bring this widget in? I'm bringing it in from Singapore at the moment. Can I import it from Germany? Are there any restrictions? Are there any prohibitions? You need to know that. You don't want to find that out when it gets to the country and it has to go back to origin. That's a waste of time, waste of money. So get ahead of it and find out what those restrictions are, what those prohibitions are, and can you execute those supply chain changes which you've got in your mind, which you're planning on doing. So how do you work with us? Well, you can work with us in a number of ways. You can actually work directly with us. We've got a whole range of APIs you can build into us to get all that information that I just mentioned. You can get it all back through an API directly from us. Or if you're already using business applications, we've got a few examples there in the panel. There's actually we couldn't get them all in. There's over 1,000 integrations that we have with other platforms, business platforms. But if you're using any of them, reach out to Avalara, reach out to us. We'll let you know if there's an integration. There most likely will be. We've got so many of them. And you can with that existing integration with the platform, you can use our products and services for cross-border, and it will be seamless. It will integrate with all the other systems that you've got, and you can make those necessary supply chain decisions, those cross-border decisions, with our tools through either a partner or directly through with us. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to hand over to our resident expert in Avatar's tax research, and that's Evan.
Thanks, Patrick. Excited to be here with you guys. So we have released a new feature inside of our tax research solution. So inside of our tax research solution, you now have visibility to all of the cross-border and trade content. So this is super exciting. We've built a lot of cool AI features on top of this content. So now you can query inside the tool to be able to retrieve accurate information regarding your products, your HS codes, to be able to display duty rates, restrictions, be able to do what Patrick mentioned of that tariff engineering and figuring out where you want to set up that manufacturing plant, and be able to understand what are the implications for duties. So we have a quick demo that we're going to play for you to kind of dive into what this tool is all about. But this is a super exciting feature. Think about it as a lens into Avalara's content to be able to do your own research. So with that, let's get started on the demo.
Better together, better for global businesses. Avalara Tax Research now includes access to U.S. and global trade and tariff content in one place, powered by AI for even faster answers. Take this product tour to see how easy it is to simplify research with instant answers and reliable content. Once you've logged in, you will see your customizable home screen. Let's add our trade and tariff content applications to the Favorites section. Open the Trade Compliance dropdown and you'll see two options. 1. Trade Compliance, a manual lookup tool, and 2. Tariff Code Classification, a guided search tool. Add them to your favorites by selecting the star icon in the top right corner of the Content app for easy access on your home screen. Let's start with our guided search tool, Tariff Code Classification. Select the icon or click Next to proceed. Start by selecting the classification level you'd like to get to. For this example, we will classify to the HS10. Type in the description of your item. We'll use golf shoe. Next, select the destination country and origin country. For this example, we will show you a golf shoe shipping from Canada to the US. This item has some additional questions we need to answer to arrive at the HS10 code. We'll select leather for the upper shoe material. For the next question, we'll select rubber or plastics for the outer sole material. We've arrived at the HS6 code. To drill down to the HS10, open the bottom selection to view the options based on the shoe's characteristics. By expanding the selections, we can confirm that the shoe is for men, youths, and boys, not welt footwear, is a golf shoe, and does not have pigskin material in the upper sole. This brings us to our HS10. Click on the HS10 classification to view the details. Here you can view the duty rates, trade remedies, de minimis threshold, restrictions and regulations, and more. Scroll to view the details. If you need to ask clarifying questions about any of our trade data, click the Contact Tax Expert button. Type in your question here, and you'll receive a response within 48 hours via email and in the Tax Expert feature in your Avalara Tax Research portal. Want to see trade information for several countries? Simply add the additional countries in the origin field to view a side-by-side comparison. We've added China and Australia. Scroll down to see each country's HS code and trade information to help you make informed decisions around where to source materials and expand your global reach. You can even download an audit trail, which includes rulings and chapter notes. If you already know the HS chapter of your item, you may find the Trade Compliance Lookup tool helpful for your research needs. Navigating back to your home screen, select Trade Compliance Library from your Favorites section. In this tool, you will see the products broken out into their HS chapter categories on the left-hand side. Using the golf shoe example, let's scroll down to Chapter 64 to find the full HS10. Here's the section that matches the output from our first search. Continue to expand the sections relevant to your product. And here we've arrived at the same HS10. That concludes our tour of Avalara Tax Research with global trade and tariff content. To experience these tools for yourself, start your 30-day free trial today for more accurate and compliant global trade. Or if you're ready to get started now, schedule a live demo to see how our global trade compliance tools can help your business.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, so this is a super exciting feature, very user-friendly, has the AI tools built into it, and we feel very confident this is a great tool for manufacturers, distributors, anyone who's doing cross-border, to really help us help them understand the implications of all of these trade implications on their supply chain. So with that, I believe we have one more poll question, and then we can get to Q&A.
Yeah, and if you want a 30-day free trial of the tax research tool you've just seen, please let us know. I'm going to leave this up for a second, and we will we'll let you answer whether or not you want to get a free trial. Is there any questions, gentlemen, that we want to start tackling as we kind of move through the?
Yeah, I answered a couple in the chat, so please check the chat. Dan Newbury, thanks for your questions, and thanks for your business as well. We appreciate it. That whole transformation question is a great question, and I wish there was one single answer for identifying country of origin where transformation happens, but unfortunately there isn't. So every country has its own rules. Shane mentioned earlier on, a trade attorney will help you, country by country, will help you work out transformation rules for products entering into that country. But sort of generally speaking, if raw materials come from the Far East to Switzerland, in your example, if there is polishing, cutting, precision alignment, which there would be in a watch, in a high-end watch, then the country of origin switches from wherever those raw materials came from to the place where that happened, where that specialist skill and that value was added. So in the case of a watch, Switzerland would be, in that example, would be the country of origin. And Dan, your other question, I just answered. It seems that you need a bit of an update on our latest features, our latest products. Please reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you, and we'll take you through them. Take advantage of that free trial.
Yeah, and on that note, I put another poll question up for you. If you would like a follow-up from an Avalara sales representative, in addition to the free trial, please let us know. If there's, again, there's other products and services that we have in addition to tax research. So we have our calculation products, our classification products. pretty much something for anyone. We can integrate in a variety of different ways. So please let us know if you want to get a demo of some of those, or just to find out more information. We'll have someone follow up with you after the webinar. All right, we are, unfortunately, we've run out of time. We'll follow up with you after the webinar for any other questions. I think there are a couple I see that we didn't get to, but we will follow up with you after the webinar to answer your questions. There are a lot of resources that we have on our website. Again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation afterwards, so you can click all of these links and you can go on the Avalara website, get all of this information. We also have a trade library that you can take a look at that goes through some of the common acronyms that are used in global trade. We have some more upcoming webinars. So we've moved our Trade and Tariff Tuesdays to bi-weekly. So that next one is going to be on the 21st, and then we're going bi-weekly after that. So you can sign up for Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. Those links are in the presentation that you will get. Well, remove if not needed. Is this not needed? You will get a certificate for CPE credit if you answer 3 of the 4 poll questions, and if you've been with us for at least 15 minutes. So look for an email post-show, or I believe there should be a pop-up as well. All right, that concludes our Building a Resilient Supply Chain webinar. Thank you for attending, and please join us again on Tariff Tuesdays, and we'll look forward to talking with you again. Take care, everyone.